I'll see you guys in the dark.
About 2 years ago, the university has dorm buildings which are open to only freshmen, and then 2 apartment complexes open to second, third, and fourth year students. After my freshman year, I was no longer allowed to live in the dorms, so my best friend, Becky, and I managed to both secure a room in a 3-bedroom apartment. Becky and I have been best friends since the 5th grade, so we were very close and consider ourselves to be more like sisters than friends. Another girl, Jennifer, was randomly assigned to the 3rd room. Luckily, we all get along great, so everything seemed like it would work out. Little did we know, there would be a 4th being joining us. Since Becky and I have been friends for so long, and even grew up in the same neighborhood, we decided to drive up to school and move in together. We moved in 2 days before Jennifer did. When we checked in with the university, we were each given 1 key for the apartment, and 1 key for our own assigned bedrooms. Becky and I made our way over to our apartment, and absolutely loved it. All the bedroom doors were locked, and we couldn't even open them without the special keys we were given. I was in room A, Becky was in room B, and Jennifer was going to be assigned to room C when she moved in later that week. The first odd thing we noticed was that the door to the room C had a fairly large hole in the first layer of the wood. It looked like an incredibly strong person had punched the door and actually broke through it. Since it was Jennifer's room, and we didn't know her yet, Becky and I went to speak with our RA. The RAs inspect the apartments at the beginning of the year and at the end of after move-out, and if there is any damage, whoever was living there is fined. Since the door was already damaged, we wanted to make sure it was already on record so that we wouldn't be fined, and Jennifer would know we weren't the ones who punched a hole through the door. Our RA, Roger, came over to check out the door. He was shocked to say the least. The damage to the door was not on university records, but he promised us we wouldn't be fined since we had just entered the apartment for the first time, and there was no way we could have done it just with our hands. You'd have to be like the Hulk, said Roger. So knowing no blame would be placed on us, we just assumed someone had busted the door moving out earlier that spring and forgot to report it. Becky and I set in on moving our belongings into the apartment. We decided we'd set up the kitchen and living room first so that we'd actually have somewhere to sit. And then we'd finish our bedrooms and bathroom later that night and the next day. We brought in a few chairs, a TV stand, and the TV itself. Then the new Apple TV Becky's parents had gifted us. The TV was also brand new, so it came in a box with lots of styrofoam. After we finished setting it all up and organized remotes and wires, Becky and I decided to go out and grab some food. We were gone for about 45 minutes. When we returned, we decided we would turn on the most recent season of Grey's Anatomy while setting up the kitchen so that we would catch up before the new season started. There was only one problem. The Apple TV remote was no longer sitting on the table where we had left it. Thinking that maybe we'd accidentally put it in the box we planned to throw away, we dug through all the cardboard and styrofoam we'd piled up by the door. We couldn't find it. Keep in mind that this was the only room we had begun to move into. There was nothing else in the entire apartment. It was completely empty. Thinking the remote would turn up eventually, we decided we'd just move on to the kitchen and our bedrooms. Jennifer eventually moved in. School finally started, and we all dived into our coursework. Jennifer joined a sorority. Becky began working on daycare, and I got a job at a local bookstore and cafe. We all had extremely busy and extremely different schedules, so we were rarely home and rarely saw each other. But we weren't so busy that we didn't notice the strange things happening. It started small, a punch in the door, a missing remote. Things began moving to places we hadn't been before. I had a bookshelf in my bedroom. On the top shelf, I had some candles and a few knickknacks like plants and mini statues. The second shelf was where I put my jewelry, perfume, lotions, etc. On the third, I had my textbooks, binders, and notebooks. And on the bottom shelf, I had placed some cute little buckets that I would put my shoes in. My perfume began showing up in my shoe buckets. Textbooks would end up on the top shelf, and single random shoes would be on the shelf that held my books. I was not the one moving these things. Due to limited cabinet space in the kitchen, we had to keep our cereal boxes on the kitchen counter. Jennifer's cereal boxes kept winding up on the top of the fridge. She's only 5 foot, so it would make no sense for her to put them up there where she couldn't even be able to reach them. Becky was an elementary education major and was starting to teach students and take on full classes of kids at her daycare. I have pretty nice handwriting, so she asked me to help write out the kids' name tags and other labels. Jennifer had offered to pitch in and help, so we were all sitting in Becky's room, chatting while we worked. I had a pile of 4 or 5 completed name tags in front of me when Jennifer stood up to grab a water. For a second, I glanced up at her, and when I turned my back to my work, all the name tags were gone. I thought maybe I'd just knocked them off the desk, so I searched the floor. And then I searched the entire room. Much like the Apple TV remote, those name tags were never seen again. One night, Becky and I were both free from work and homework, so we decided to go out to dinner together while Jennifer was out with her own friends. We got dinner at our favorite Mexican restaurant, went home, put on some fun face masks, and hung out in Becky's room. We were up for hours talking about this new boy Becky was seeing. Around midnight, Jennifer came home and laughed at us for leaving the kitchen sink running. The only problem was we hadn't touched the kitchen sink. We had gone out to dinner. We didn't even cook anything at home or wash any dishes. In fact, neither of us had been in the kitchen all day. Events like these happened multiple times. We started joking that we had a ghost. Whenever we found things in places they shouldn't be, or had inexplicable things happen, we would laugh and quip, "Oh, the ghost strikes again." Although strange, we weren't too concerned about the things happening, until they started to get worse. As lame as it sounds, all 3 of us began to just feel a change. We were all uncomfortable being in the apartment alone, especially at night. Our rooms felt somewhat safe, but standing in the open hallway or living room felt uneasy. It always felt like something was behind you, or that someone was watching you. You know that feeling you get when you are turning off the light at nights and you feel like you have to run up the stairs or down the hallway before something can get you? It felt like that. All the time. Even in broad daylight. Despite our crazy schedules, we began brushing our teeth together at night and getting up together in the morning. I wouldn't come from work until 10 or 11 o'clock p.m., and Jennifer wouldn't make it back from sorority events until midnight or 1 a.m., but we waited. Becky had to leave for work at 5:45 a.m., but we would still all get up with her. No one felt safe alone, so we made sure no one was alone. On the rare cases that we were left home alone, we never left our rooms. We felt so unsafe and uncomfortable. It got to the point where we were taking extreme measures so that we wouldn't have to leave our rooms. One weekend, Jennifer was out of town, and I was working late, so Becky was home alone. She had been chilling in her room, and she began to feel the need to use the restroom, but she decided she'd just wait until I came back. Unfortunately, my shift kept getting bumped later and later. Becky was so terrified of leaving her room that she resorted to peeing in an empty bottle she had been laying around. That's how frightened we all were. We all wanted to visit home and see our families, so we left the apartment the same weekend to go home. Becky and I drove together and went back up to the university late Sunday afternoon. As we were walking up to our apartment, we noticed there was a ton of commotion at our neighbor's apartment. We stopped by to make sure everything was okay. Apparently, someone had broken into their apartment early that morning and ransacked the kitchen and living room. All the food in the fridge had been dumped into the kitchen floor, furniture had been moved or knocked over, and the posters and tapestries had been ripped off the wall, but nothing was taken. Additionally, there was no sign of forced entry. Whoever had gotten in and walked in freely. All 4 people in the apartment confirmed they had locked the door. One of the boys had OCD, and locking the door is part of his regular nighttime routine. Furthermore, there were only 5 keys in existence that would unlock the front door, 4 of which were all in possessions of the people inside the apartment when the break-in happened, and the 5th belonged to the university in case of an emergency. University police and city police never found out who did it, or how they did it, or why they did it. It even gets worse. Things began to happen right in front of our eyes, and even got physical. I began waking up with bruises all over my leg. I am an active person, so initially, it was easy to credit the bruises to sports or walking into a table at work, but the bruises started becoming more regular shaped, almost like fingerprints, and they began occurring more and more often. At the peak of it all, I woke with a full-on hand-shaped bruise around my calf. It looked like someone had grabbed my leg and squeezed it until it turned black and blue. One night, Becky had been home alone in her room. She heard the front door open, steps go down the hallway, and then Jennifer's room door opened and closed. Since she was no longer home alone, she felt like it was safe to come out of her room and take a bath. Becky went into the bathroom, locked the door, and got in the tub. All the doors in the apartment were thick and heavy. They have the type of locks you have to completely turn, and the doors don't have round knobs. Instead, they have large handles you have to push down and pull in order to open. While relaxing in the tub, Becky heard a clicking noise. She looked at the door and saw it had become unlocked, then watched the door slowly open. She jumped up and grabbed a towel, thinking that maybe she didn't actually lock it, and Jennifer was coming in to use the bathroom. No one was at the door, in fact. Jennifer wasn't even home. I came back to the apartment about half an hour later and found Becky, still in her towel, crying in her bedroom. She swore she heard Jennifer come home, and she swore she locked the bathroom door. We were running out of explanations, and our ghost was no longer a light-hearted joke. From then on out, the bathroom door and kitchen cabinets opened and closed randomly. The only thing that remained untouched were our bedroom doors. When they were shut and locked, when they were left open, everything seemed to be fair game. One morning, I had cleaned my entire room. I washed my sheets, made my bed, and decorated with all the cute throw pillows and blankets my mom had gotten for me. The whole atmosphere of the apartment had become dreary and miserable. We were terrified, hopeless, and just flat out exhausted. Bringing out the things my mom had gifted me and snuggling up in the blankets she had sent me made me feel safer. After making the bed, I ran to the bathroom directly across the hall to grab a scrunchie. There is clear view of my bedroom from the bathroom and vice versa, so when I turned around to head back into my room to get ready for work, I had a clear view of my bed. I watched in horror as all my pillows and blankets I had just put on my bed flew off and fell to the floor. I was in shock. Knowing I kept an extra work uniform in my car, I just grabbed my keys and left. I couldn't process what had just happened, and I definitely couldn't stand to be there any longer. I was 2.5 hours early for my shift. Luckily, my manager didn't seem to mind me sitting in the break room until it started. All of these events happened in a matter of just a few months. We moved into the apartment in late August, and it finally came to a climax in late October. Jennifer's sister was getting married, so she had left town for the weekend. But Saturday, I had a full shift from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. After the longest shift of my life, I came home hungry and exhausted. Becky had surprised me and cooked a full breakfast for dinner, a meal with eggs and bacon and pancakes. Things had been so stressful and busy lately that we hadn't really seen each other for a while, despite living together. It was amazing just to binge eat and gossip with my BFF all night. Eventually, we tired out and decided to go to bed. Becky went and got into her bed, but she left the door open so I could see and talk to her while I brushed my teeth. When I finished getting ready for bed, Becky asked if I could shut her door for her since she didn't want to get up. I went over and shut her door, turned off the bathroom light, and naturally sprinted back to the safety of my room. I wasn't super tired yet, and I had just begun watching Game of Thrones and was obsessed. So I snuggled into my bed, opened up my laptop, and plugged in my headphones so I could binge. After about 15 minutes went by, I got a text from Becky. She said, "Stop that." Having been fully immersed in King Geoffrey's demise, I had no idea what she was talking about, so I responded, "What are you talking about?" Becky replied, "It's not funny." Dude, I really don't know what you're talking about. I've been in bed, watching Game of Thrones. Seriously, I know you're just messing with me. I'm really tired. Can you please just come back and close my door? At this point, I was really confused. I had no idea what she was talking about. After a few more minutes of going back and forth, convincing each other that neither of us was playing a prank on the other, Becky called me, crying and yelling at me to come to her room. I jumped out of bed and ran down the hall to find her sobbing and as white as a sheet. According to Becky, she was starting to doze off when she heard her phone ding. She woke up to check it and saw it was just a random Twitter notification. Before she could turn her phone off and go back to bed, she heard footsteps in the hallway. When she looked up, expecting me to walk in, she watched as the handle to her door moved down, as if it was being pushed, and the door flung open. Obviously, it spooked her, but she thought I had run down the hallway, thrown open her door, and dashed back into my room in order to scare her. She yelled my name multiple times, and when I didn't respond, she texted me. I had been in bed, with my headphones in, and volume up, so I didn't hear the door, and certainly didn't hear her yelling. After we both realized whatever was in our apartment was actually trying to get to us into our own rooms at night, we were obviously terrified. We decided that we would both sleep in her room, because we were too scared to be alone. And I was way too afraid to go back into the hallway to get to my own room. We shut and locked her door and turned on all the lights. We spent the next hour or two talking about what was happening to us and actually diving into our beliefs regarding ghosts and other paranormal events. It was the first time we had actually sat down and discussed every aspect of it. We began piecing everything together. Despite our overwhelming fear, we decided it was time to shut off the lights and go to sleep. We flipped a coin and I lost. So it was on me to go across the room and shut the lights off. As silly as it sounds, something just felt wrong. It was a simple thing to do, but every cell in my body was screaming at me not to do it. After a few minutes, I mustered up the courage and made my way across the room. As soon as my fingers touched the light switch, there was an enormous thudding down the hallway outside. It sounded like somebody with bricks for feet was sprinting down the hallway. Then there was a banging on the door, as if someone was hitting it with their fists as hard as they could. I ran back to the bed with Becky and cried. We both did. We just sobbed and sobbed. I felt utterly trapped, like an animal backed into a corner. We just sat there in silence. Eventually, we became so overwhelmed with exhaustion, we passed out. My dreams that night were horrific. They were dark and gruesome. Around 4 a.m, I woke with a start. At least I think I did. That whole night was such a blur. I don't even know what was real. What woke me up was this warm, heavy pressure on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I felt like air around me was just getting thicker and thicker, and I couldn't expand my lungs to take any of it in. Worst night of my life. The next day, Becky packed a bag and left. She said she couldn't stand it there anymore, so she went back to our hometown to recoup. I had responsibilities that kept me from leaving town, but I left the apartment and spent the day either outside, at the school library, or bouncing from cafe to cafe. Anything to get out of there. My grandmother is very superstitious and believes in the paranormal, so I called her for some advice. She explained to me that since we are flesh and blood and living, and whatever was disturbing us was not, we had the power to simply tell it to go away, and that we didn't want to see it. With nothing left to lose, I went back to our apartment and screamed, "Go away. We don't want to see you," into the empty air. The next morning, Jennifer came back armed with sage and a prayer. Becky returned 3 days later with herbs and oil of her own. We did a complete cleansing of the apartment. As far as I know, it worked. The town the university resides in is very old and known for having multiple haunted properties. In fact, there are 3 graveyards dating all the way back to the late 1700s on campus. One of them was on the other side of our apartment building. Before this experience, I would have said I absolutely do not believe in ghosts. These events shook my core beliefs, and now I'm not even sure what I believe in. But, considering the history of the university, the graveyards, and the number of reported hauntings in the town, us having a ghost in our apartment doesn't seem so outrageous. I just hope whatever it was is gone, and it can't terrorize anyone else. So this is pretty long, and it seems a little unbelievable. But it made my family's lives anxiety-ridden for almost a year. My family and I were on vacation, visiting extended family in St. Augustine, Florida. We'd been there for about a week when we decided to go on one of those walking ghost tours in downtown. It was the middle of the summer, so it was pretty muggy. And honestly, we weren't that spooked because there were so many other tourists walking around the city at the same time. It was about halfway through the tour when we went to hear a story and take pictures of one of the cemeteries. The cemetery was gated, so we all gathered along a fence to look in at the gravestones. There were no lights in the cemetery, and no background lights that filtered into the cemetery from behind. From what we could tell, my mother was taking pictures with her iPhone next to a lady who was filming on her camera. The woman who had filmed exclaimed and pointed on her camera, which showed a circular blue light floating around in a circle, slowly, for about 10 seconds. For some context, it kind of looked like a lightning bug, except the light didn't go on and off. And it was a very muted, light blue, very non-threatening, but interesting. My mother snapped a picture at the same time, but didn't look through her photos right then. We continued the rest of the tour, and nothing else strange happened. No sounds, no orbs, any other further lights, etc. Near the end, my mom was flipping through her photos and found the photo of the cemetery with the blue light. On only one of the photos of the cemetery was the blue light. This one looked more like a neon light. It was in the shape of the letter E. She showed it to the tour guide, and the tour guide said, "Oh, that's strange. Good thing your name doesn't start with an E." My mom laughed a little bit and said, "Not my first name, no, but my last name does." My mom is very religious and superstitious, and was extremely weirded out by the picture. She thought it was eerie, almost like a bad omen. but we honestly all ended up dismissing it for the next couple of days as we finished our vacation. After we left St. Augustine, I went back to college in Alabama, and my family moved to their base assignment in Louisiana. The very first day, my mother was upset. The house was tiny, old, and just generally unsettling. The base housing had given her the keys to the front door, and as soon as she got to her house, the little number on the side of the key, corresponding to the front door lock number, was 666. My mother was freaked. She called me and my dad, who told her to ignore it or change it. And then she called housing office and requested they replace the lock and keys. And that started off her constantly seeing that number. She'd go to the grocery store, and the total would be $66.60. She'd go on a road trip to visit, and the GPS would tell her the destination was 66.6 miles away. She'd order a pizza, and the total would be $16.66. She was just seeing the number everywhere. My dad told her it was just because she had noticed the number and had bad feelings surrounding it, and that she noticed it. I told her just to ignore it, because she'd likely see it more if she paid attention to it. She tried to, but every time we'd talk on the phone, she'd list more and more times she'd seen the number. My mother was convinced it was somehow tied to the photo she took in the cemetery, and deleted it, thinking that would stop the number from reappearing. The number wasn't all, though. Shortly after moving into the house, weird things started happening. The lights would turn on and off. You'd hear old 1920-ish music playing, or you could hear or heard people's voices distantly talking in the other room when you were the only one in the house. You'd turn the TV off, go into the kitchen, come back. The living room and the TV would be on again. Objects would go missing and stay missing for weeks, only to appear not at all where you had left them. My dad went to mow the yard, and he took off his wedding ring and placed it on the table next to the front door. He came back inside, and it was gone. He told my mother about it, and she didn't believe him. But they searched the house top and bottom, anyways, for days, and couldn't find it. 2 weeks later, the whole family came back from getting groceries, and the ring was sitting on the center dining room table. Just generally, the feeling in the house made you feel heavier and anxious. I ended up staying a week there during the school break. We had 2 dogs at the time, and being a young college student, I liked to stay up pretty late. There was no spare bedroom, so I slept on the couch. I was watching TV, Family Guy or something at around 2 or 3 in the morning, when I heard a scurrying sound in the hallway to my left. At first I thought it was our Yorkie, who doesn't honestly sound like a little rat when she runs back and forth. But then I realized she was sleeping on my feet, along with my boxer. The sound definitely sounded like an animal with claws, not one of my siblings or parents, and the sound kept going back and forth, up and down the hallway, getting closer and closer to the living room. Now I am a total chicken, and rather than get up and investigate, I turned on the Catholic channel, covered my face with the blanket, and kept my eyes shut until I fell asleep. The rest of the week I didn't stay up late, and I fell asleep with happy kids shows and a light on, and was honestly so relieved that when I was able to get back to my dorm. Now my dad, through this entire thing, was writing everything off as just in our heads or coincidence, until he saw it. He was sleeping in the master bedroom. My mom was beside him, passed out. He woke up and looked to the side of the bed. It was near dawn, so it was light enough to make out a boy standing near the edge of the bed. At first, he thought it was my brother, coming in because he'd had a bad dream or something. But then he looked closer. My brother has light eyes and blonde hair. Whatever this was had older style clothing, black hair, very pale skin, and completely black eyes. My dad blinked, and the thing was still standing there. It stayed there. It didn't move or anything. About 20 seconds before it vanished, my dad had completely creeped out. He woke my mom up and told her about it. And that was the point in time he started believing something strange was going on. They tried a lot of things. Praying together, saging, putting crosses on just about every available wall surface in the house. My siblings, who were largely kept in the dark of this because they were little and we didn't want to scare them, requested to start sleeping with cross necklaces. It would frequently sleep in my parents' room. While at times the activity slowed, it never stopped, and it always picked up again. After almost a year of my family decided to visit my grandmother. Now, for context, she's a pretty negative person. She nearly always believes the worst in people, and generally doesn't have a positive thing to say about much of anything. But she's family. Well, my family was there in her house for about a week, and while they were there, the lights would turn on and off. The TV would come on random. You'd hear voices faintly in rooms you knew people weren't in. Just general creepiness. Well, after they left to go back home, my mom remarked to my dad that she felt lighter, somehow. Almost as if a weight had been lifted. My grandmother ended up calling a few hours later. She asked if my siblings or my parents had left a music player in the back room, to which they said no. She said that was strange, and that she'd been hearing old-timey 1920s music coming from the back bedroom all day, but couldn't find the source. After that, nothing else happened at that house in Louisiana. They moved out a couple months later onto the next assignment, where everything was normal as well. My grandmother, on the other hand, started acting weirder and weirder, flying into fits of rage, and just generally being more shut off and angrier than usual. It took her almost 4 years to return what we saw as her normal personality. My mother thinks that whatever it was attached itself to the most negative thing it could find, my grandmother, and it took my grandmother years to shake whatever it was off. Either way, my mother will never go on a ghost tour again, and the whole thing is just an unsettling, dark time in our family's memories. I grew up in Ireland, and back in the 90s, my family had a small holiday home in Ballyhornan that we shared with a bunch of relatives. The house was long since been sold, but there was a couple of freaky things that happened to me that will always stick with me. The house was located in a small, isolated area with a bunch of other holiday homes and families. The entrance had a farmer's field attached where people could always pat and feed the white horse that was always there. Polo mints were his favorites. One year, when I was around 6 or 7 myself, and my younger cousin crawled through an opening in a barbed wire fence that we used to do regularly to go pat the horse close up. This was also in the middle of the day, so it was completely bright. We were feeding and patting the horse when I noticed along the top of the field a person running across. But something was weird, as they appeared to be completely translucent. They stopped dead in their tracks and turned to face us. About 50 yards away. At this point, the horse started kicking and neighing and became extremely unsettled. It ran off to the other end of the field. We turned around, and this person was still coming at us. We could see a face, and I remember it being completely sinister looking with a smile. Me and my cousin absolutely bolted back through the barbed wire fence and ran straight home. We didn't mention it to any of the adults because we shouldn't have been entering the private property. So we had a few sleepless nights, but we had let it lie. In my adulthood, I had recounted this story to a few friends, but sort of at the same time convinced myself that I fabricated it, and maybe it was nothing. Until one day, I ran into my cousin at New Year's party a few years back. We hadn't spoken for some time, as he had been living in America. but over a pint, I recalled the story to him, and he absolutely recalled every single detail. This gave me the weirdest, chilling feeling I had ever experienced. Mainly because I assumed that we did see something, but they had most likely fabricated it. But he even recalled this person's face, and the sinister look, and the translucent appearance. This is not the creepiest thing that most people have ever heard of, but I often replay it in my head over and over again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.